your browser, Brandon. You gotta let it upload all the way.
Recording to me, right?
Everybody.
It will record it inside of the broadcast studio.
Cool.
We're live, y'all. We're here.
Oh man.
Let me tweet this out. Let me put it out into the Twitter sphere because if it's not legit until it's in a tweet. Oh, I see. Let me put this here. We are live coding. Y'all come join us in making some AI workflows in JavaScript. All right. Posted. We are now official. Okay, y'all.
Cool.
Let's take it away. What are we working on today?
Where we left off, we were had just made this end-to-end testing workflow file, which I'll remind myself it's been a few days, but this took us through running end-to-end tests to test the MCP that we're building, using Roo as the MCP client. And so essentially, kick off a workflow where Roo goes through and runs a test against each of the tools that the MCP provides, and does an end-to-end test. Looking at the workflow here, the instructions area has 17, nearly 20 steps, and it's got some output format that it wants the end result in. I think there's some some notes at the top here, some examples. So we can go through it and run it really quick if we want to remind ourselves where we were.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Something we'll talk about in a second is custom modes. I think since we worked last time, I made a custom mode. I wanted to intentionally not use that custom mode this time. So we're going to switch over here and say run in and test using workflow. Let's see what this does. Oh, and actually, let's cancel that. Let's do it right here.
So for those that aren't familiar, Roo Code is one of our favorite tools, but it's a VS Code extension that essentially allows you to, it's an agent essentially, right? Like it's a far more advanced version.
I call it like a meta agent almost.
Mm-hmm.
A meta agent. It works significantly better than tools like Copilot and things of that nature. But I've become a very big fan of it. I was indifferent in the beginning, but I have found myself. Huh? Yes. I will say I still use other tools, but I have always enjoyed my VS Code experience more than pretty much any other IDE. And so because of that, I do end up reaching for this significantly more than probably anybody else. And because of that, my cloud usage has definitely gone up.
Well, I think some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, I'll make a case for why some of the features that Roo has that are unique to it are like required features to really achieve like success in high levels of autonomy.
Okay.
One of those will be custom modes, which we'll talk about in just a second after this workflow goes through.
My favorite feature on Roo too.
So it's going through here. You can see it's calling MCP tools that we built in the Clockify MCP. I've got always allow. It should be on everything, but it's possible some pop up that I haven't allowed yet. Making those calls.
And by the way, if you haven't seen Roo Code, do you notice how each call it makes, there's a cost next to it, so that way you know exactly how much it costs you? That's kind of the big deal. That's like the game changer for me. Almost like Cursor for VS Code. Which model does it use? Right now we're using Claude 4.0, but you can essentially use almost any model you want. Mm-hmm. With Roo Code, you bring over your own API key. And so that's like a big one to kind of, you control the cost. And because of that, I think it's also cheaper in the long run based on the calls that you're making.
Well, probably more expensive than a Cursor plan, like our Windsurf plan, right?
Is it though? I've been wondering about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also really popular in the Roo community. A lot of people in the subreddit talking about using a lot of the free LLM models that are out there. So,
Guess it depends on which model you use. Yeah,
Mhm.
but I probably spend like $100 on Claude 4 every day that I
Oh, $100 every day. Oh yeah.
do like significant work. I mean, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't do enough of this to spend $100 every day. I wish I did, but
Yeah. Any sub fee or all API run. It's not like Cursor where you pay like a monthly fee to use it. Roo Code is free,
open source.
but you bring over your own API key, so you're paying for any calls that you're making through that. Man, I swear I thought you were like showing your API key for a second. I was like, no way.
Come on, come on.
My heart stopped for a second.
gotta watch with the live stream. You know, we need a button that we can like roll back, like any
Yeah.
last 10
It's
seconds.
on 15-second delay.
Yeah.
Cut the fees.
Oof.
No, and we changed things with this. Like one of the challenges of making MCPs is a lot of like API keys involved usually, right?
Mhm.
So like we're doing Clockify, so like Clockify API keys involved. Like we were using the GitHub one at times. So we have GitHub keys, but it's really a best practice to not have keys in plain text files,
Mhm.
right? Like a number of like the security researchers have noted that malware has started to target specific paths for MCP client configs. Like your Claude desktop config is going to get scanned by malware, and those keys are going to get extracted if they're in there. Just as like, okay, run Claude code, and here's the environment variable for the GitHub MCP. Here's my access token. Um, you really need to have those things in like a keychain or whatever the corresponding thing is for the OS you're using, and have the executables pulling that out of there, so it's not so available. So we made those changes to the MCP that we're working on. So like everything's in my keychain. So it should be hard for us to expose a key.
Good.
All right, so the
Can I
test
give a-
finished, and it looks like there's actually some errors. I don't know that we're going to care about addressing the errors right now, but that was the gist of the workflow. It should have gone across and tested all of the tools and given success or failure the report for each one, so we can see
So-
if the kind of failure.
So these are tests running essentially like inside the agent. Like the agent is making these MCP calls and evaluating what like it expects the results to be.
Yeah, so like the thing it's testing the thing we're building, right?
Mhm.
And so it's almost acting like as our little QA team here, like our QA engineer. So it went through and it exercised them directly at like the highest boundary possible. Like it used it. Roo Code is an MCP client, so it used the MCP we're building directly, um, and tested all the calls. We can go back up and look at one of the calls here. Like okay, so it made a call to the tool, analyzed time gaps, and passed these arguments, and then it got this response back.
And I guess like one net benefit of this is that instead of having to write end-to-end tests, you're just writing essentially a doc that it can just run off of.
Okay, yeah. So the difference, like, because we definitely could make end-to-end tests, and that is something we probably want to do. We haven't done it yet. Like, we have some integration tests here, but they're not like full end-to-end.
Mhm.
Right.
And so we could write those. But one thing you don't get from an end-to-end test suite is exploratory tests, right? And so, like, something we've said in this workflow is that we wanted to. Let's see, it's either in here or it will be in the mode. I know for certain. So I may be spoiling here, but let's see. Yeah, creative exploratory test cases. So we're asking the agent to be creative in how it tests what we've built. So the idea here is that like we're capturing what you'd get from humans testing in addition to your automated test suite. And it's a little bit of a contrived example too. So we're just trying to show like how workflows and modes could work to do different parts of your like software lifecycle. So what we did in this one though is we had code. Roo comes with 5 modes out of the box: code, architect, ask, debug, and orchestrator. These are all out of the box modes. These 2 are custom modes that I've created in this project. But we use code mode to do this testing. So I think we wanted to kind of showcase custom modes here a little bit. So really this kind of thing where you're doing this intent testing, you're doing exploratory, it starts to get like enough of a persona where you'd want some specifics um, to make it more effective. So a few things you can do with custom modes. So we'll look at like just like the YAML version of modes for a second. Um, is okay. So you define a name, you give it a role definition. So this is kind of like the persona. In in Roo Code, the modes kind of follow a certain pattern, but they don't have to. Um, but most prompts, when you put when you're putting a model in a mode, you kind of
Hmm.
have a similar style to this, right? So we're saying like we're adaptive QA engineer with expertise around MCP servers and exploratory testing, right? And so um, when we add a new tool, we want it to pick up the new tool. We don't want to have to list off the tools to test in a prompt and stuff like that. Like we could do it, but we don't want to have to do it. So we got some things in here to like be dynamic and explore, discover the tools that are there. Like an MCP client should be able to query the server to see, or on connection, I think the server communicates the tools that are available. So it should be able to discover them that way. Um, and then, like as we've talked about in past streams, Roo Code has like an orchestration mode, right? So like if you're using Orchestrator and it's going to be creating new tasks and things like that, Orchestrator looks at the modes it has available, and it looks at this field within the modes to choose. If it's not been explicitly defined for it, it wants to choose which mode to delegate when it's making a task. So, like we'll see in a second, if I asked Orchestrator to do an end-to-end test, it's almost certainly going to create a task with this tester mode, and that's because it uses this value when deciding. You get some custom instructions, which is just kind of like further prompting. There's some notes here to like make sure that it rebuilds before it does test, stuff like that. And then I think, what else do we have in here? I think that's it generally. But some other mechanisms that are really powerful with custom modes are when you make rules, there's a general rules folder, which these rules apply to all modes. But then you can make mode specific rules. Because what you run into is like, okay, if I'm doing coding, the rules for testing effectively are not really applicable to that activity. And so it's just watering down the context and like misdirecting the agent in some way. So if you place specific rules into mode folders, then you get like a more barreled out approach to what the task you're trying to do. So I think that's what's really important when you're trying to do these bigger workflows, where we got like a bunch of steps and it's very specific to one thing. A mode can really help. So I think we'll run it again in the background. We'll just run Orchestrator. Think of it the same thing, like run an end-to-end test using. We'll give it that workflow again.
Yeah,
this is like
we had a question come in real fast.
Yeah,
if and I'm curious about this too. If we have multiple models API keys, can it switch or prioritize price versus performative versus vice versa, or vice versa?
So Roo Code does not make any decisions for you on which model to use when you're running it. That's all up to you. But you can create a multitude of profiles here for providers. And like if we look at the provider profile used for testing right now, that's Claude 4 1.0 thinking. And so these provider profiles are important because it's more than just selecting the model, right? Like you choose the model here, we're using Claude 4. But for the testing one, I also have some like thinking and reasoning going on. So I have that configured here. I don't have this on for coding right now. And then I also am using a custom temperature, right? So like this is tied to like randomness and creativity. And so like, again, the mode we're using is supposed to be exploratory testing. And so when I'm coding, the temperature is really low, often just 0 for coding. But it's at 1 here, which is relatively high for that, like capturing more of that kind of exploratory stuff. So that's all in the profile. So let's get this back to the right one. So let's kick this off and see what it does. I think we'll see one if it picks up like that custom mode.
I love that you could just add a file in Roo like that to just like give it immediately the file as context, and it has a really nice autocomplete too. So you can type out extremely elaborate instructions like in a markdown file to reuse, fix your data, things of that nature.
Yeah,
and then naturally, your code files too.
Yeah, it becomes one of my favorite features of theirs.
So it's building out the prompt for the tester mode. We can already see it's
Yeah.
going to create a subtask in tester mode.
So right there, it kind of used that it ID'd the mode that it wants to use based on that when to use description you put into the modes, right? Because you have that role definition, which you can define that, and it prevents you from having to go act like this or act like that before every single prompt. You can write a lot of laborious things about how you want the mode to act. But yeah, just right there, it goes into the when to use to just oh, I need to use the workflow tester.
Yep.
And I mean, then with that custom mode, it seems like you can also associate that directly with a specific model that you have set up inside of Roo, and not just a specific model, but a specific model configured in a specific way. So it's if I want Claude that's thinking, that's also I can turn that creativity knob way up. I can have that set up, and then I can have another configuration of Claude where all that stuff is slid very down. So
yes, these two drop downs are actually tied together. So the last setting you had for tester is what it will use when it switches to tester next time. And the same for all these. So you kind of can configure.
So you could technically put inside the when to use function of a mode, you could be use this mode if you want to use the OpenAI LLM. If there was some random reason why the orchestrator would want to do that.
Absolutely.
So in theory, you could obtain that's what I like about Roo is it's developed in such an abstract way that you could obtain that functionality where it's I wanted to automatically switch between models. You theoretically could achieve that. You might have to
the modes could just be you could name the mode after the model if you want it to be really tied. Yes. So custom modes are a little bit of a unique feature amongst coding agents. I think I believe firmly that there'll be a very ubiquitous feature in the future, just for a lot of these reasons, right? As you try to get more autonomy out of the agent, you're going to naturally create more rules, which is going to hog more of your context, and so you're going to need a way. Cursor and others have created ways to kind of put conditions on rules being applied. So that's trying to work against this problem.
Right.
But ultimately, when a rule needs to be applied, it's going to be less about the file it relates to, and it's going to get into things okay, when I'm testing, I need this rule. When I'm doing X, I need this rule, and that's going to be harder to. You're not going to be able to define that in terms of which file it applies to. It's going to need to be what activity am I doing, and then the way you do that right now is you reference some of the rules in the message, but that's going to get unwieldy as you get more and more rules, right? So I think we'll see what happens. Maybe there'll be other patterns for dealing with that. But custom modes are definitely seem like a good current way that Roo Code does it. I know Cursor has, I think, custom modes in beta. I'm not sure if that came across in 1.0 yet. I haven't looked in detail.
Yeah, I haven't picked up Cursor now in 3 or 4 months since I switched over to Roo.
Yeah.
It's funny how that works out.
I mean, it's it's interesting how many really valuable features this project has built out. And I mean it's free too. I mean it's the extension's totally open source and it's free. It's just the model spend is going to be involved in that. And again, there's free models out there that you can link up, and even locally running models. So I am just the massive amount of flexibility. Crazy flexibility is what I've been liking about it.
So we're using this workflow file to do this testing, right? Again, that's what we talked about at the beginning. It's got, ultimately it's just the steps to go through these 17 instructions. Now all this goes across in a single prompt. So one thing that starts to happen is this kind of puts some strain on the model, right? Not all models are going to be successful at going through 17 distinct steps. And get there accurately. This is just a phrase here, right? So what you take one prompt, it's not going to get the exact same result across 10 different models.
Right.
So prompts tend to work well with certain models, and if you're tuning them, you've really tuned them for specific ones. And the same with the tool calling. You see a lot of the agents work really well with Claude Sonnet models, and they don't. They work decently well with Gemini and decently well with some of the OpenAI models, but like you start to go to some of the more smaller or free models, and you run into like random issues and things like that. Um, so in the same way, like these workflows or these files that you create that you end up sharing, you have to tune, and you may run up against limitations. I know that's like one thing that I've run up to a number of times. Is like some of these workflow files to like this is just testing, right? So like, okay, just to test everything, it's 17 steps. But what if I wanted to make a workflow that went through like my whole software process? Like I want to start like I have a ticket and I want to work that whole ticket all the way to like I've got a reviewed PR that's done. That workflow is going to be like 100 plus steps. Um, and it may even span multiple files if you want to break it up that way. So it starts to just put like more and more stress on like, can the model in a single context window, right? Like go through all that. And so I think that brings me to like another feature that we've used a lot, but I just want to call out like it's critical for trying to get like long running, bigger autonomous tasks to be successful, which is like this idea of like orchestrator and what Roo Code calls like boomerang tasks or like subtasks.
Yeah. And what's with the XML tags that is inside that workflow file? Is that something that like Roo is aware of and utilizes what to do, or has the agent been instructed ahead of time about like I see an instructions tag, I see an example tag?
Well, so let me show you where I brought that from. This is what do they say? Is the finest form of flattery? Copying. So I reference this a lot, which is like Anthropic has a doc section on prompt engineering, and so like they have a section on XML tags, and some things it says here like. So this is more about the model, not about Roo, so not the agent, but the model's understanding of things. And so, like here's a great example. This is an example, and it might confuse this for an instruction. So the docs call out XML tags can be a good way to differentiate like background material from direct instructions. So that's kind of what I tried to do here. Is I have a broad context tag up here, which is like kind of introducing the idea. And there's an example in here, and then I have the instructions explicitly wrapped in the instructions, and then output format. I think I'm following kind of some of those things here. I don't think the tag matters so explicitly.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see like tags like. So that's where this comes from. And then I also really like what Klein and Windsurf have done with workflows. That both those tools have introduced workflows in the sense that they're like first class. So if you make a workflow in either of those tools, you can reference it in a very specific way. It's either like a slash command or there's like a special @ command that flags it as a workflow. Now, ultimately, what that does is it takes a markdown file that you have and kind of formats it this way. And so that's where I kind of lifted some of the formatting from to just try out because it's like, okay, if this is successful, then let me try some of it. And so far, so good. I didn't try it too hard without it. But yeah, they have some good tools to try to make it easier where you don't need to do this. I think if you do some stuff where you kind of ask the model to help you refine the prompts and you pointed it at this documentation and said, okay, how can I improve this prompt? I think it would say things, some similar things. That's where it comes from.
I need to start using that more. I guess I can definitely see the point. Like it adds like extra semantic like detail to just like what's being talked about instead of it just like being in my head. Like this is the output format that I'm talking about. These are my instructions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about how Claude 4 especially is very like it pats itself on its back on its output. So like if you leave it up to a lot of its own determination, it'll talk about its operational excellence. It achieved 100% success. It recommends production deployment immediately. These kind of like just like goofy stuff that it puts in there. So like, yeah, it kind of explicitly trying to conform it to a certain output can help you get what you want. Okay, so I want to show more on this kind of boomerang task thing. So that's what we did with this one. If you remember at the beginning, we said like run an intent test. This was our prompt at the top. You're running an intent test, and like you were saying, Brandon, at the beginning, like
Mhm.
it looked and said, okay, the tester mode's ideal because it saw this kind of write up in there. This is how it identified it. But then it came down and it created a subtask, and it created the prompt for the subtask based on the initial prompt and what it inferred that it needed to do. When it made this subtask, though, it entered a new context window. So all that came into the subtask from the parent task is what's in this box, the prompt. So everything that it had done previously in the context displayed previously doesn't come into it. This is what gets passed in. But then it gets a whole new window. So it doesn't have any of the noise from the parent task. And then when the subtask comes back, it doesn't bring back with it any of the noise from the subtask. Like let's say this thing
Mhm.
tested the 20 tools or so that we have in here.
Mhm.
All the test results are meaningful, but what comes back is just the results. So based on the inputs in, it tells it kind of what output formats it wants to come back in, and it just comes back with the summary. So the only thing that gets added to the parent context is the summary of the subtask. So that subtask could have gone all the way to the end of the road on the context window and even compressed it a few times if it needed to. But when it comes back, it's just what it reports back. So like if you're trying to do a super long running operation, you're kind of unavoidable that you're going to hit your context.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to have to compress it. And every time you compress it, you're going to risk kind of the copy of a copy of a copy problem.
Mhm.
And so these subtasks can really raise like the fidelity of the long running task you're doing. So I feel like that's also a pretty unique feature that I think really helps with longer.
Yeah,
runs.
I mean, I find too using the orchestrator mode with those subtasks like helps the problem that I run into a lot when I'm coding with these like coding agents, which is that I mean, by the time that context window fills up, when you give it a prompt, like it'll start doing something that was related to a thing you might have been talking about in that task like 5 minutes ago. But since like you figured out, oh, we really shouldn't be doing that, like you kind of you zig and you zag when you code, and you zig in one direction, you zag back to where you think things are correct. But agents aren't super great at whenever they're like running one task to know to stop using certain information. You got to be like really explicit about do not do XYZ. So the flow of like creating these smaller tasks, I mean, it's reinforced too a lot by I see the cursor team bring this up of like don't just keep one long running window going all the time. So I've been having some fun with orchestrator mode.
Uh-huh. Okay, so
Tools,
this next thing we're going to do is like help me build out a backlog of what remains on the tools. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we have some documentation that it generated previously on a prior stream, which I'm referencing here, and I wanted to look at the tools that are already implemented. Say that, and like which of these remaining, like what endpoints or tools. And let's say like output findings in a
So you're going to tell the agent here to essentially like, reference some docs from Clockify and, let me know. I mean, we're doing gap analysis here right now.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of wondering like where you got those Clockify docs from. Did you just
so on a previous stream we pointed at Clockify's documentation and said to create those markdown files.
Nice. So a little bit of upfront work to get the docs like statically loaded into the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could use something like there's
huge
some tools may have MCPs that'll
Mhm.
keep it more up to date because this could be out of date. But in some documentation already has like little sugar to like, okay, let me copy it in Markdown or stuff like that. Clockify does not have that. And Clockify's documentation is such that it's one long page with anchor tags. And it's a large API. So like it's actually rather you can't just point it at a URL and say go read uh, the docs. So we did that work up front yet to make this easy here. Like when it's troubleshooting, it goes and looks at that. Let's just go look over. We have this docs folder.
I mean, this is like a huge pro tip. I feel like anyone that's using coding agents right now, like that you need to get on with, go ahead and find the docs up front of like obscure SDKs or APIs that you're using and load them in. You don't need to go get the Next.js docs and the React docs. Most LLMs are trained on stuff like that, but like Clockify is a specific system that we're working with. Yeah. The agent may be trained on those docs, but I mean, being that it's so specific, it's really unlikely.
Right.
Loading it into a markdown file is like,
so it loaded in a bunch of docs and it had to create these kind of like table of contents files. So I just pointed at these and then it can find its way from there. But then it has these documentation here, like some stuff around how the API works. And then it has endpoint specific documentation.
And I mean, I have to say that's really slick too, because now instead of having all of your docs in one giant markdown file to like blow your context window completely out when it loads that file in, it can look inside the index file and sort of like selectively pick which files that it wants to like consume.
Yeah, so what we're going to do here is
we're looking at what's missing.
We're going to make a backlog, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think we're going to try to see, okay, can we make a workflow that implements the backlog, which is going to be like a much longer running thing. With Claude 4, something that came out is like Claude 4 is way more tool friendly. So you can kind of do like multiple tool calls at once. And Roo Code's added some stuff for that recently to where it'll read more than one file at one time. So if you look here, it's like one tool call that's reading 5 files. Whereas previously it would have said, Roo wants to read client service. Roo wants to read report service. And like that would have been 5 API calls and back and forth round trips. So, not only is it cheaper, but the really big thing is it's faster.
This is the part where you get up and get a cup of coffee, Better get that coffee fast because the task is already done.
And you see here too, like this is where you really have to kind of like govern it over time with more and more rules, because like what it's doing right now is it's creating kind of this like artifact as part of this task, like this current implementation analysis, which is not something we care about in the end, but it's something that it's putting together for its own kind of like, I guess, inner task kind of memories. I don't know whether it thinks we want this or not. I mean, we were pretty explicit about what we wanted in terms of a backlog file. But you see when it's orchestrating, it's doing some stuff that's a little bit different from it, right? Okay, we asked for just a backlog file. Maybe we should have been a little bit more specific. But it's going to do like a backlog for now. No, this will be fine. It's going to be one file. We'll see what it comes with at the end. But often I'm finding it creates kind of these artifact files, which are undesirable in my opinion. So I have to have them clean it up. So there's room for some more rules,
right?
To tell that to just keep it in the buffers that it's passing around, and don't create a bunch of artifact files.
All right, I'm gonna have to drop now, but I'll leave y'all to it.
Thanks for hanging out, man.
So let's see what it's starting to bring out here. All right, so we've got a summary at the top here. Okay, these are the things that we have. These are some things that are missing. Now, these are not really specific. These are kind of general things.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point you brought up, that like how much of this is the agent doing because it needs it itself. Like sometimes when I'm working with my agent, I really do try to think that like I'm working with like a junior developer, and I don't know if I would just like walk over to their desk and be like, why are you taking notes right now? But I mean, I assumed it would keep all this in its head, but I mean, I don't know. That's I too find this to be a little bit annoying. It'll spit out markdown documentation files when I don't want them. But you know, I mean, that's just I think the LLM doing work.
Mm-hmm.
Puts in these little time estimates. I've seen this happen before too.
Yeah, that's stuff that I think you got to trim
Mhm.
off, right? Like
It'll be very human with this, like, oh yeah, this will take 2 to 3 weeks to do, and
I'd say one thing though that is a strong pro tip is if you're having it do reviews or make recommendations, to ask it to put some form of um, confidence level, like priority rating, something along those lines, um, because
is
you
that like a
gotta.
readiness rating or like?
It can be however you want to define it. I just said
Yeah,
provide a confidence level.
got you.
Um, in this sense, I'm assuming it's confidence level, or I'm hoping it's confidence level is strength of the recommendation.
Hmm.
Like, because we asked it for like which things we need to include for like the monthly invoicing reporting, and so like how strong it feels that yes, this tool or this endpoint is needed for that task. Because without that, um, without these kind of things, because I don't think it'll do them automatically always. If you don't ask for it. Is how do you differentiate what's a nitpick versus what's critical? Like, right, like if you're having it do a coterie for you, or like give me a review of this code I've written, or like you're having an
Right.
agent write code and then you're having an agent review the code to try to improve it. Um, is it dealing with like nits, or is it dealing with like meaningful things? Um, you may find that like the high confidence level stuff you can auto accept, and like the medium or low you want to punt and save for later. Like you may want a human to review those because they may be more opinions versus like, yeah, definitely do that. Whereas when it's saying like 95%, that may be, yeah, it's just, it feels it's not aligned with the requirements type of stuff. So
Mhm.
that gives you, I think, a way to filter the responses you get from like review or recommendation. Because if you're trying to be, again, like really autonomous with it, and you want to have it do a review and then just address the review feedback, uh, having those confidences may give you a gate to say, okay, uh, address all the medium or high feedback. The rest, put in the final report for like future opportunities for improvement. Or you could even say you have to implement the medium and high. The um, the ones below that, let the submitter, meaning the other agent, decide if it wants to address those or not. And like you could say like address them if they're style or basic formatting stuff, but if it's going to be like a large change, punt. Um, I
Hmm.
think that gives you like a lot of ability to actually mirror real life, because that's the same way that it happens when like if you're reviewing my code, Brandon, you're going to have a variety of levels of feedback.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're done with this now, and we're looking at it. When you go into the details, it gives the endpoint. So let's see like some
Business.
of the ones
So
that
it
are.
and there's one thing it said like business impact critical. Is that inferring that from like an initial use case we wrote out, or do you think it's just kind of like feeling that out in terms
I
of?
think it's kind of feeling that out a little bit. I
Mhm.
mean, we said like that we're doing like invoice reporting, reporting for invoice generation, and so I think it's kind of it's doing what it does, which is kind of filling in some gaps there.
I
And
mean, I'm
helping
definitely
out.
kind of thinking about like, I mean, doing this gap analysis. I'm really thinking about how, like, I mean, a lot of times in software engineering, we have like a whole list of things that we need to complete, and there's just like a whole different set of like metrics to determine what it is that we do next. And some of those is like,
Mhm.
how ready is the feature to be worked on? Like,
Yeah.
the documentation, do we have the assets, the business criticality.
Mhm.
I mean, definitely. I mean, the confidence level, I guess. I mean, maybe that's like a summation of everything together, but I mean, my point being, we can just like get these metrics like much faster. I mean, I can ask like, is the documentation readily available? For what it is that we want. So
Yep.
I did have I had one question come up from
Okay.
attendee here, asking what is the best local model for coding? Because I personally don't have a whole lot of experience running my models locally. This is something that I've been wanting to get a little bit more on, but I've been hearing a lot of like buzz around Llama. Seems like a lot of people really like that. There's a Llama for coding, or
Quinn
like
3.
Code Llama. Mm-hmm.
I don't have experience with it either. I'll be honest. I think like my whole game right now is all about solving the problem of how do I automate my whole day-to-day
Yeah.
task. And I think if that's the endeavor you're on,
yeah,
you don't look like, I'm not asking, okay, how do I save a little bit of money on my day-to-day? I don't look for like, what's the model I can run locally or remotely. The questions I ask is like, which model is the best at automating tasks right now? Like, which model can run the longest, the most effective? Which one can, orchestrate MCP tool calls and workflows most effectively? So that's like when, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's what I've been all about. So that's where my focus has been entirely. I know, like on our team, Mark does a lot of variety of stuff, and I know he's recently been really hot on Quinn, and yeah, Llama, no Llama.
Yeah, I think like I probably hear the most about Olama. I know you can just go to like olama.com and download this thing and just like kind of get up and running. But yeah, I personally don't have like a huge use case for like locally running LLMs myself either, but I mean, I could see in the future. I mean, I've thought about like, our business is going to head in the direction of getting their own data center that's really just like a massively interconnected GPU. We're going to have like mainframes back running, business tuned models specific to them. We'll see. But right now, me personally, I've kind of stepped away from thinking about the models and how to run them and how to develop them and things like that. And I focus a lot more on this activity, which is like how to utilize them to like the most efficient way possible.
Mm-hmm. As Mike asked, like talking more about the like automating day-to-day tasks, I specifically mean around like software engineering tasks. I mean, I think interestingly enough, like the thing we're the thing we're working on this kind of like short series of streams is like a Clockify MCP. So, like selfishly, that is for some of my more business-oriented tasks, not software-oriented tasks, like the monthly invoicing thing, which I'm one of the people involved in that, like wanting to make that better. So, like if we use Clockify for time tracking at this dot, QuickBooks Online for invoicing and stuff like that. So, like ultimately, I got to have like an MCP for those two tools if I want to try to make like the monthly closing more streamlined, right? I got to have some MCPs for the tools that are involved in that activity. And so,
I mean, it's a great use case for an agent, right? Because I mean, one of the number one things I find that these like LLMs are best at is like highly repeated tasks, things that happen the exact same way every single month using the same data source structured in the same way. I mean, it would sit down. I mean, for me to sit down and do billings, it could take me, I mean, that could consume a whole day for me and I can just get rid of that, especially if I just have open-ended questions. A lot of times when I have open-ended questions and I'm looking at, a giant spreadsheet of hours that have been worked, it can be really hard to infer like some value from that.
But I think in terms of coding, the main thing is after you go through a period of like where you're driving the agent in chat, you're like, okay, now do this, now do that, now do this, now do that. I think like take it to the next level, try to ask it to do a broader task, and like you've either created rules or you've created like a rather lengthy prompt of like, okay, I've been giving you 10 prompts back to back to do this thing, and now I'm going to give you just all 10 of those prompts, and I'm just going to give it to you in kind of this format here of like, step 1, do this, step 2, do that, right? And see how effective that is. And I think continue to push the boundary on that. Like if it does something consistently wrong, like if it's like consistently doing something silly, like using NPM when it should use PNPM or something, like make a rule, right? Like make a rule to not do that. Like use PNPM every time, or add it to your prompt. And like, okay, on step 5, it's always using NPM. Like, okay, make a note there and do that. Like I think that just forcing the issue of, okay, I want AI to be able to automate this thing. So let me just keep getting like 1%, 1%, 1% better.
Yeah.
Trying to automate that thing. that's really it. And that's what a lot of these streams have been about, right? So like we now have got this backlog, right? So we can put it in action. So um, we were just talking about like the testing workflow, right? So we can kind of kick off a testing cycle, which is kind of short prompt. But we haven't done anything for like implementing stuff, right? Like we on previous streams have said things like, okay, go and implement a detailed report or something like that. Um, and we're kind of driven it. So I think we're going to try here to do something a little bit more automated. So let's go through and like let's find one here that looks interesting, um, and reasonably short for watching it. Let's see here.
Okay, yeah, get
Project details looks pretty decent.
Yeah.
Time entries,
Set,
deleting
post,
entries.
delete. Yeah, I kind of like want to skip over like anything that's mutating data almost right now. Just look at like reading it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Well, some of the stuff I don't agree with. We're down in like the priority 3, so I actually agree that they're lower. I need this thing to help me with invoicing, right? I don't need it to approve timesheets.
Right.
And so why don't we look at like getting enhanced project details? I have a sense like reports are going to be larger, so we don't need to be modifying hourly rates with this tooling, so we're not going to do that one. Let's see a good one here. Yeah, I think let's look at that enhanced project details. Where was that? Here. So let's try that. So we've like added some rules and things like that. I wonder if we can. It's been interesting. It's created. Let's fix this Windows here a little bit. It's created some of these artifacts from plans that we did before, right?
Right.
The way we do it before, we were driving it. We'd say, okay, first create a plan, put it in Markdown. It's like this is an implementation plan from like this client management, and then we have some other like refactoring, creating time entry tool. It has a plan for when it did ESLint. I wonder if we can kind of like jumpstart our workflow process by saying like, look at these tools or these plans and like create a workflow for doing an implementation generally. Let's see what that does. This kind of thing sometimes can be surprising in a lot of different directions. So let's see what we get from it. So I'm just going to take like every one of these plans that looks like an implementation, not our backlog file. Key ring was pretty distinctly different, so I'm not going to pull that one in. And this is troubleshooting, so I'm going to ignore that. So I'm going to bring like all these in and say, review these implementation plans and create a generic implementation workflow within workflows. Let's just call this like implementation workflow. With specific instructions, let's say specific numbered instructions, and then let's go one step further. We have that other workflow, right? Let's say like reference end-to-end testing workflow for the structure to use for workflows. Right. I don't know. This could be pretty wild, right? Like,
yeah, it's like we got all these implementation plans in here. We got some other people in the chat shouting out some love for Roo. Augustinus, I see you. I see you, Augustinus, in the chat there. We're big Roo fans here at this.labs. I'd have to say. Elliot's been on it for a little bit longer than me, but I've been using Roo now daily. I might be 60 days in, maybe 90 days. I'll have to look back, but it feels like a long time because when I first got started, I was just using the baseline stuff. But now that I've started to like dive into more and more of these like advanced configuration options inside of Roo, especially the custom modes, man. That's like a huge game winner right there. It has been a massive improvement to, my productivity. I've never felt further from burnout. I'll just say that much. Like I was writing an endpoint today, and you know what I had to do for that API endpoint? I had to write a response for invalid data. I had to write a response for 404. All these error responses and everything had to go in. I know exactly how to do all this stuff. It's very standardized and basic. And for me, it's kind of just gotten boring having to do the same thing over again. So I love being able to just say, hey, look at this endpoint and how it responds to errors and duplicate that. And then it went far enough to just refactor everything. So it used an abstraction. So we use the same code between both endpoints. So, all while I was sipping on my cup of coffee. So it's like I knew mechanically what the tasks needed to be done. It's like, I know in my head exactly what it is it needs to be completed. But I had 2.5 to 3 hours of, what I always like to call hand jamming on the keyboard, which is just typing, just typing. And I could get distracted easily. And if anything, that creates burnout for me is when I'm constantly typing functionality that is, I don't know, when I spend more time typing than thinking, that burns me out. That's my summary.
I hear that. All right, so this is the workflow it spit out from that prompt.
Can we switch it to Markdown mode so we can see it in Markdown format? I always like to just look at it in just in straight Markdown preview mode. Sometimes too, like you can say when you're creating these Markdown files, you can tell Roo to make a mermaid diagram if like you feel like it's applicable, and it'll do.
The thing is,
sometimes
this file
not in this scenario though.
The file ultimately is for it, not me.
Yeah. It's not going to get much from a mermaid diagram, or maybe it does.
I don't know.
Maybe.
It certainly can read the mermaid Markdown better than I can. I don't think mermaid diagrams can be created by humans. After
no, I don't know what I'm looking at when I'm just looking at the raw Markdown.
All right, so this is like context stuff at the top.
Mm-hmm.
All right, some feel goods, cool.
Comprehensive testing, documentation completeness.
Break it down. Yep. Okay, interesting. Risk versus planning. Okay, cool. Create documentation alongside. All right. Testing integrated, build tests into each phase. Okay, cool. Let's see an example. So like architecture analysis planning. Okay, risk assessment. Cool. Foundation phase implementation. Create directory structure. I don't know if that's how humans would do it, but okay, we'll see how it goes. Okay, so this is going to be this is only so generic, right? Because this seems actually generic to this project, but not generic beyond it, because it's going to do like service later, tool implementation.
Like this is all stuff that I feel like I would see in any project.
Now we don't have any unit tests here yet, so it looks like it's going to create some. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what here. Pre-production validation. Okay, full regression test. All right.
Mm-hmm.
It really does like personify itself, right? Like it's going to be in the retrospective as like step 11. Conduct a retrospective with me in it is like kind of this thing here. Okay, and output format. Let's see. For each phase, document overview details, checkpoints, success metrics. When we're talking about like Claude really patting himself on the back, like this is going to be a gold mine for Claude glazing right here. We'll see when we get there. Okay, is there anything else that was in here? No, that's it. Okay, so I'm a big fan of like, okay, we did a cursory review. Like, I'm sure we have things that we can improve about that, but like, let's see what it does with it, and then let's improve based on that versus like staying in like the theoretical realm of like, okay, I have an idea of how this is going to turn out. Let me try to improve it right away. So let's do a new task. And then we had our backlog here. And I think the task was that we wanted to do. Find it again. I've lost it. Enhance project details. Okay, so let's do a new prompt here. We're going to do it in orchestrator mode.
Yeah, and while you're typing this out, I'll add for Augustinus in the chat and other chatters following along. We're currently in the process of building an MCP that is for the most part inspired by an already existing API for a service called Clockify, which Elliot and I use to kind of like do time tracking for work that we do for customers and things of that nature. And a lot of times we have open-ended questions that we have about the projects, time consumed. And also in general, we just want more experience building an MPC. So I keep saying MPC all the time, and I'm going to correct myself right here now. It's an MCP, Module Context Protocol, all right? But I think we all need a little experience building these because I think, as engineers, we're going to find that more and more businesses with APIs that are ready to integrate with systems are going to be looking for, hey, we need an MCP that people can drop in to whatever AI agent it is that they're using. There could be finance back of house AI agents that, Clockify should have an MCP so you can plug in and say, which of my projects are about to go over budget, and you could have a response where you write that in there and you can take that and run with it as opposed to having to open up a spreadsheet and kind of sort of figure it out yourself.
Yep.
I always like to build stuff that I know I'm going to use. Like I know there's like a lot of dogma around like just build anything. It doesn't matter if it's valuable, but like it keeps me motivated when I know it's something that I would use. And like an MCP like this, I know I would use because a lot of times I wonder which of my projects are about to go over budget. I said I would get something done in 40 hours. Which of these projects I've already spent 80 hours on something?
So we're doing like a number of like things that I found to be kind of best practice of workflows already. Like we're doing like the numbered instructions.
Yep.
We're using subtasks. Like it's already in a subtask here from the small prompt we gave it. And it's in architect mode, so it's doing some planning. The thing that we're not doing intentionally so far is we're not using checklists. So like we have this template for a workflow. So this is kind of like the template, but we don't have like an instance of the template. And so one thing that can be really effective at helping it steer itself over time correctly is to have like a file-based or a memory bank-based checklist. So if it say copied this workflow file or copied the instructions and created a markdown file that was specifically for implementing the enhanced project details that we're doing the tool for now, and then like output these steps with checkboxes, that would allow it to lose track of the checklist a little bit and still be able to come back to it. So if it knew I just have to come back to the checklist and do the next thing, I just have to come back and do the next thing. I don't have to remember what the next 5 things are. I just have to come back to it and do the next thing. That can be, in its context or in its memory, a simpler activity. So it's maybe more likely to be successful. And you get some resumability. Like let's say this fails randomly because I closed my laptop or the network disconnects or something like that. Now Roo can resume when in the task, but like let's for a second assume it couldn't. Well, or you wanted to abandon the one you were in for some reason, like maybe your context got poisoned or something like that, and you got to get out of it. You can start a new task and say, hey, look at the instance of the checklist. It's already checked off the first 5 steps. Start on the next step. So you get like some resumability from that too.
Nice. Shout out to Rob, by the way, who's hanging out in the chat right now. He says, what's up?
Hey, Rob.
He says, what's up? Another subtask off.
Yeah, I think getting to the point where we've got just jobs running in the background. Like, okay, I've got this backlog of stuff to be implementing, and maybe I want it to go one by one, or maybe there's these
Mhm.
five tickets or these five things on the backlog that really don't overlap with each other. Like, let me just start five different jobs on those for those. Like getting this, growing this kind of directory or this kind of this Rolodex of workflows for your regular tasks, I think is huge. I think just build building blocks, and then compose those into bigger building blocks, like stuff that we already know very naturally as engineers. Um, that can be like starting from the littlest thing, like, okay, here's a workflow for creating a commit message, right? Like, so when I want to say just like
Yeah.
make my commit message, like this is what you do, or when I want it to like uh, do a PR review in GitHub. Like maybe I want to make a workflow that does the PR review and creates it all as like review comments, but doesn't click submit, and then lets me come in and review what you've already done, edit it if I need to, add my own um, individual thoughts to it, and then submit it. So like all of a
Mhm.
sudden now I got a jump start in reviewing PRs, right? Like um, it maybe helps me catch some fine grained stuff, and I focus on the big points. um, so like build up
Yeah.
the directory you have of little workflows that are your day to day tasks, and then I think you can start to as as you get more competent and as the models get more competent and agents get better, you can compose those workflows into larger workflows, and you're more productive. You get more done.
I mean, we're about to. I mean, we're headed in the direction of concurrent subtasks, right? I mean, that's kind of like I think one of the things that people want to see out of like an orchestrator mode, like what we have with Roo, is like the ability to identify, what two things can you do simultaneously. And you brought up doing a code review. I mean, that's kind of an interesting one because the way I do code review, my brain goes through a checklist and I read the code thinking about
Mhm.
one thing and then I read it thinking about another thing and then another thing. And if I could just, I mean, it's a micro optimization, but if I could have, it look at the code from a security standpoint, a
Yeah.
cleanliness standpoint, and a testing standpoint, and a generate documentation for a human reviewer standpoint, and do all four of those things at the exact same time, um, that would be very helpful for someone like me, I would say.
Yeah, you want like here's like a immediate pro tip hack, right? So like everybody's making um, features and products using AI or like MCPs nowadays, right? Like there is
Mm-hmm.
all this, right? So like almost everybody watching is probably like adjacent or directly involved with something that uses AI. And like security is a huge thing. So like let's say you're using Roo Code or some other agent that has
Mm-hmm.
ability to do some customized stuff. Go and grab the OWASP top 10 for LLMs and Gen AI. The top 10, you know, per OWASP, which is a pretty reputable project. Top 10 vulnerabilities around Gen AI and LLMs.
Hmm.
Grab each one of these individual pages. Have something scrape these. Have Claude scrape it into Markdown if you want, or have some MCP if you've got something that does it a little
Right.
bit better. But regardless, get these things into um, Markdown. You maybe need to follow some of these reference links. Build out a set of documentation around this, and then create you a custom mode that references this documentation. And then exactly like you just said, Brandon, have that do a pass on code review for the product you're doing that involves uh, AI based code or not AI based code, but code that uses AI. um,
I mean, we need an MCP for information like this. I mean, the security industry is one. I mean, I'm thinking about what a boon this could be for the security industry, which is a nonstop arms race, right? One CVE comes out, it gets popped by another. MCPs are really useful for providing like super up to date information to your agents. I wonder, I'm going to have to do some research afterwards, but I wonder if anyone's working on an MCP for tracking open CVEs. At least start there. But these practices right here would be something that this information changes on a regular basis. I mean, we've come a long ways in 6 months from, I was writing zero code with AI 6 months ago. Now I write more than the majority.
Well,
but
how much would you learn and how much value could you provide to your peers and your team if suddenly, okay, all the work we're doing that is involving AI features and things, now we've got I've got a tool that when I'm doing the code, or I can share the tool, like share the mode with my team. We've all now got a tool. Now we've got like a really thorough, like security researcher on our team, but it's an agent because we don't have that resource on our team. But now how much more productive and how much more,
I mean, a lot of that
safe are we?
researcher is like a key word there too, right? Because a lot of security is just staying informed about this evolving stuff, right? How's the task doing?
We're on phase 2. Let's see if we can glean how many phases there are going to be. I don't remember from this. Let's see, workflows, implementation workflow. One of the things like a love-hate for me is orchestrating VS Code. You kind of need a second instance just to
I mean,
look at the code.
Stuff like that, I always feel like makes me know like just how early we are as users in some of this, because there's definitely times where I want to prompt Roo Code and then I want to go look at something else inside of VS Code. And yeah, the best way currently to do that, have 2 instances of VS Code running. But give it time. Give it time. All this stuff is going to get resolved, I feel like.
Service layer development. So it's step 4. I don't know where phase 2 comes from here. It says use a phased approach, but it doesn't in the workflow number any of the phases. So it's kind of on its own it's on its own journey. This, I think at this level of autonomy, though, it definitely is. It's like begging to be a background task for all the things we were just saying, and just because I want to be able to like fire this job.
I mean, I've been doing this behavior a lot, Elliot, where like I'll have them open still, even though I'm in VS Code using my agent. I've started using multiple editors, so. I mean, maybe that's kind of where we're headed. Honestly, I think though it's just a matter
out of the IDE. That's where it's headed.
Yeah,
you want my vote. It's not like you don't need an IDE anymore, but when it's working autonomously successful, you don't. But when it doesn't work, you do. And when you want to get more involved in something, it's just doing you do. But like what we're doing at this moment right here, I'd like to see where it ends up, and I don't know that I'm definitely not watching what's happening on these diffs on the right side.
Yeah, you can't keep up.
And I care about what it's producing, but I don't care about what it's producing while it's producing it. I kind of want to like let it cook. I want to see the PR at the end.
Yep.
Because I'd say one of the patterns that's already in this workflow that maybe we didn't talk about, like huge unlock, is when you start having AI review itself. So like rather than, okay, it's trying to make an edit and then, it's going to stop and say, do you approve this change? I don't care to think about it right there because the change that it's proposing hasn't been reviewed yet. So I don't even want to spend my valuable energy on something it hasn't even gone through its own cursory check yet. So I want it to do all the implementation it thinks it needs to do. And then the next thing I want it to do is I want it to go back and review all of those changes against the plan that it created up front. Does it align with the plan? Are there any code smells that it sees in there? Is there anything that seems like not aligned with the existing architecture of the system? It's going to have some feedback, almost certainly. I've never seen it not have feedback. I want it to address all that feedback. After it's done with that, I want it to, does it all pass linting? Does it all pass the tests that are automated? I want to do this end-to-end test. I don't want to be reviewing a bunch of code and then oh, it fails 50% of the tests. Now I got to modify it significantly.
Mhm.
What was the point of all that review I just did? Uh, and so get it all the way and tell me this thing is. I've done all I can do with it. Now have a look with it.
I mean,
Okay.
this is a real world behavior, right? I mean, as software engineers, we write code and then, we clock out at 5, go to sleep, come back tomorrow, and then we look at that same code we wrote and effectively review it and find issues. I mean, it's
Yeah, this is exactly right. So that's right. I think it's going beyond it. I know all these tools, they have to gain trust, and that's why people want to be
yeah.
approving it and following along with it because you want to understand it, you want to gain trust with it. But I think after you do, you rather quickly are kind of done with this. Let me approve every change. Um, um,
I mean, I entered the world of just auto approve on everything. I mean, a few months
you've got
ago,
source control,
and
right? Like you've got source control. Like if
yeah, I
it
mean, I
goes
have
off the
source
rails, like
control. I
roll it
have,
back.
I have the diff, and I mean, I've had people give me feedback, and they're like, "Look at this garbage that the LLM generated. This and this doesn't make sense. Why would it do that?"
Well, put that
I
in
mean,
the
when I
next
see that,
prompt.
I
Tell
write
it
that in the next prompt. Yeah,
It's
I fire up a
exactly
new
right.
task and I start going, I don't like that this function is really long. I also don't like that all the if statements aren't, all the way at the top for catching
Yeah.
all my error conditions and. I mean,
Yeah.
put it all together. And what's kind of hilarious is like over time, I've actually built up like a markdown document of my own like personal opinions that I just call it like Brandon's opinions.markdown. And I start
Yeah.
throwing it at implementations that are work in progress on applications that I'm on. And it just, I mean, a lot of times when it comes to code messiness, it's like more opinion oriented. I think I just want it to adhere more to like what my worldview of how something is. But
But yeah, like this one, for example, like this is a new project, right? I don't
Mhm.
want it over architected right out the gate. So like we
Right.
created a rule early on, which is like, this is a young project. It's brand new. Like we don't want to
Mhm.
be abstracting the hell out of everything. Like we don't want everything optimized. Like we want it simple and working. And so, yeah, you got to do those opinions. Those opinions are not. Uh, I know you said it's Brandon's opinions, but they're still contextual. And I know you like implied that in there. Like each project it's going to have its own opinions of how something needs to be, right? So like
Yep.
if you're going into like a giant existing project, you're probably not going to have a lot of success with it
Mhm.
being super autonomous right away, right? You're going to have to
Mhm.
start small. Like in every context, you have to again kind of go back to it. Okay, this big project, you know what? I'm going back to it's doing my commit messages. It's writing my test case. It's gonna create some documentation. It's gonna review some PRs. But you know what? I'm not having it day one go and implement the whole sprint backlog. Like that's not going to likely work because I'm going to have like a zillion opinions about what came out the other side. And so you got to climb the ladder, right? Like have it do something a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a
Right.
little bit bigger, because each project's going to have an overlapping set of opinions, but also a big portion of that that's unique. Let's see where we're at. Phase 3, tools. What was it doing here? Running some tests.
Using node test. Very cool.
We'll see how it finds with that. Okay, good.
Okay. All right. I mean, it's. Oh.
The integration tests it has in here right now are like really goofball. It's like individual Node.js scripts that it runs. It's not using like a testing library or anything right now.
I mean, you think that's just like due to the mode that we have set? I mean, do we have a rule in place that says don't download third-party external libraries?
No, we don't have anything like that, but it is due to my
Mhm.
past instructions with it. Because I did
Right.
I did some goofy things with it. At one point, it was having an issue with like some complex endpoint. I think it was like a customer port endpoint, and it was like it just could not figure out how to call the API correctly. And it was like some parameter within there. And I basically just told it to like brute force this API. Look back at the documentation endpoint. Um, create thousands of tests if you have to. Call it a million different ways. Figure out what you're doing wrong by like experimenting a ton. And so it like just created like oodles and oodles of these kind of integration tests, and then figured it out and kind of pared them down. But I think it often references what's there. So some of those artifacts from that are still there. And I've never gone in because we haven't done testing on this, at least at this stage of the project yet. That end-to-end testing we were looking at the beginning was the first instance of testing that we did. And so like the tests that are automated in here are kind of these like weird contrived things. We need to come back and have it do something.
Yeah, I see some interesting integration service .test.js -test.js little.
Let's see what it's on right here. It looks like
it's stuck on this like proceed while running thing. I mean, is it something that sometimes I find you just kind of like hit enter in the terminal to.
Let's see if that works. I think it more is there it goes.
Yeah, you can get that's an interesting bug in Roo that I'm gonna like get into their open source repository and try to track that down. But like sometimes it gets a little hung up in the terminal there.
Well, I
don't know why.
I'm not sure if it was like they're missing a new line or something at the end here.
I mean, this is kind of like the origin of how, I mean, like Cursor started. They started as an extension in VS Code and started like, running into a situation where they had to build like their fork VS Code entirely. I prefer how Roo exists as an extension that's standalone. I hope they don't have to go that route to get like the quality of experience that I envision it have, a year, 2 years in the future.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's be too many more. I mean, I think like Windsurf obviously had a successful exit, but I think it's Copilot open sourcing some stuff around their extension. I think Microsoft and GitHub are seeking to not have a proliferation of like VS Code forks.
No more forks. Let's not create any.
I think they changed the license also.
Yeah. Oh.
But I do hope it gets out of the IDE. Like I want to take all the modes and the.
Well, what's the value of seeing that diff? I mean, watching that red and green diff fly all over your screen is very cool looking, but I can't say as a software engineer I get a lot of value out of that. That's screen
if it was stopping. If it was stopping, you'd get the value, right? But if it's not stopping, it's kind of like I kind of want like the Cloud Code experience, but with Roo Code, because I also want to be able to use these tools and like these workflows we create. Like we were just talking about like a PR workflow, right? Like, I don't want to have to say, "Oh, I'm going to go review this ticket. Let me tell it to do the PR workflow." Like, I want to have a GitHub action. Okay, a PR was submitted. Part of the CI is the review workflow that I created that pulls from the OWASP stuff and everything else. Like, I want all this the trimmings, right? I don't want to have to, as a person, be monitoring PRs. I want that to be automated. Like we've moved way past that with automation, and so like all these agents are for the most part very chat based and interactive, right? Like, but I think it's trending towards more unattended, non-interactive. As you get better with the interactive portion, you want unattended, right? You want non-interactive abilities too, so that the things you've mastered you can automate. Cloud Code does that. Codex is out of the IDE, but it's not like automatable in that way. What else? Like Cloud Code is a big one. Codex has a CLI version. AMP Code has a CLI version. So, the CLI tools I feel like have been the inferior
Yeah.
experience so far because like when you're interacting, I don't really. I mean, I know Brandon.
I mean, we're
You maybe differ on this. Like, I don't want an interactive terminal.
Yeah. I think most people feel that way. Like I'm a big like in-terminal individual, but I definitely think, I mean, if you want as many people using your tool as possible, especially something like this, I mean, I feel like you need that GUI interface, especially for creating the custom modes and stuff like that. Like, sure, you can open a YAML file or a JSON file and start writing it in, but I think like we're gravitating further and further away from that world. We used to live in a world where we would look directly at memory addresses, in a program. I mean, the way that we modified and inspected a program was completely different than, what we were doing in 2010. So getting into a location where we wouldn't even look at the code, maybe. Is it that unbelievable? I haven't looked at a memory address in a decade.
I think it's all about the autonomy.
I mean, I like the CLI tools, man, but I don't know. I find it interesting that Claude and that these companies have decided to go that route of using a CLI tool as a thing. That's intriguing to me that they don't just release a standalone desktop application. Maybe that just means that they don't have to like build a GUI, and they can just move faster. But I don't know. I find it interesting that Claude Code just isn't like it isn't a native desktop application, just like how Claude is right now with all the configuration.
Well, we'll see. I mean, like, but yeah, I think the interactive terminal way is kind of lame. And I'm somebody who's used terminal a ton in the past too. But like,
oh yeah,
I want the non-interactive, pipeable, composable, like doing some small things well tooling. I don't want like the the interactive, let me talk to the agent type of mode, at least in that UX. I mean, it works. Quad Code's great, but I just feel like it could be so much better. But then you lose like the non-interactive way that Quad Code can run well, right? So I feel like it's gonna people. I think everything's gonna have the terminal-based non-interactive way because that's the key to automation in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, like a head and a headless mode or something like that, because that's going to be. I mean, we had this one chatter come in, watch YouTube account says CLI because it's smaller. Smaller I think is good in a world where we have a lot of different kind of agents working together, in tandem. So I mean, maybe Claude Code is orchestrated by some kind of higher level thing, but you got all that disk space. You got to fill it up with something. Come on. Unused memory is wasted memory, guys. Come on. That's a joke.
Yeah, being able to run the stuff in cloud containers and stuff like that, I think it's going to be huge. If you want to be able to fire off the 5 different jobs like we were talking about, like sure you can open multiple terminal sessions or multiple VS codes. But ultimately, like you're going to want containers for that either locally or in the cloud, preferably in the cloud, right? So
I mean, I kind of like how like the Docker ecosystem evolved around this stuff, where it was like a very CLI oriented tool, but then people built like higher level GUIs for individuals that preferred that experience. And there were definitely moments where, I mean, I could see a future where you could have 10 agents running all at once. In that world, you're probably not going to want to be in a terminal. You're going to want some kind of GUI that can give you just like a higher level abstraction visually of like what it is that's going on. But
like you want to see like, okay, I've got these 5 jobs working on these 5 tickets, or I've got this review job working on this PR, and you need the ability to like drop into it. But if all is running well, you have no interest to drop into it. You just want to see the result. If there's an approval step for a job, like you want to drop in when you're at that approval step.
I mean, it's like, I mean, I could almost like envision, a world where, it's like you have your multiple agents running, but sometimes you run into that situation where you give a prompt to Roo and it's like, oh, that didn't work. Let me try another approach. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try another approach. And about 4 things down, it eventually goes like, let me absolutely sledgehammer this into place. That happens like really quickly. I think right now, I think in time, as like LLMs become more capable and the tasks we give it become more and more complex, they are going to run unassisted for an hour, 2 hours at a time. And when an agent starts to fall into this mode where it's like, what I'm doing isn't working, and I'm about to grab a sledgehammer and slam it in, I kind of want like, I want something popping up in my face to let me know that, you know,
hey, you might have controls, right? You might say like, okay, if it's looped through this cycle X amount of times, like pull the cord, right? Or if it uses X amount of tokens, pull the cord. Like what if you start setting budgets? Like, okay, this level task has this level budget. If it hits it,
absolutely, yeah.
You know, pause it, cancel it until I come and look at it. I think you'll need those kind of controls.
The budget thing is super valid, man. I think that's definitely, I mean, these agents are becoming like fuel for us. So right now, I don't feel like they can run unassisted unless you do a lot of that legwork. But we're gonna. What was that?
Is that a Mad Max analogy?
It's the gas wars, the LLM wars are here. Oh man, but I mean that's just. I think I don't know. I mean, I think about that because I feel like we've lived in this universe where, like, you know, to build software, we don't really consume any form of like raw material. We don't consume like a resource to do it other than human hours. To run software is compute. Yeah, sure. In the cloud, dollars are consumed, but like actually like writing, you know, the software and doing the logical work behind it. I mean, we have access to like a higher level of energy now, but I mean, there's a dollar figure attached to that. And right now, these tasks can run unassisted for 30 seconds. So you can't run up a big bill. But when it comes commonplace that we're writing tasks that run unassisted for an hour,
we've probably been going half hour.
Really complex. Well, you know, Elliot, you're a little bit better than me, man. You got your rules together. I find that if I find a task for me, the danger zone is 10 minutes. That's where I'm at right now. The danger zone for me is like 10 minutes. But I would say I haven't personally probably invested enough into, you know, writing some of these workflow files or defining like custom rule sets that do things like, hey, if you do run down this direction, try again or repeat yourself.
Something that I found, because one of my first kind of experiments with this was heavy on rules. And if you notice on this one, like we're actually like the tester went a little wild here because I think I let it loose, but like we have almost no rules. We got a rule around comments, which I think it is only lightly adhering to, which will be the point I'm about to make. And then like there's a rule about rules. And then there's like the simple planning thing, right? So like very little here. When I went heavy on rules before, I found that wasn't as effective as what we're doing right now with workflows. And there's like a couple things interesting here. I think the workflows are more explicit about like order and what to do. And so like if you wanted something that applied to a specific step, just putting it here, I think I see more success with doing that than putting it in a rule. Now, all these things get templated together in the prompt, but where it is in the prompt matters. And so, like rules are meant to be Nat in this room. Rules are like more off to the side, things to pay attention to, whereas like the workflows are like explicit instructions. And so, finding way more success with putting specific things here and only really general things in the rules. Like doing it all in rules, actually, it did help. Like it moved the needle pretty far.
No, this is something that I'm going to need to try out because I mean I'm right now in the middle of migrating like a really old legacy .NET application, and I've gotten very far in the implementation, but now I'm kind of in that space where like this data relates to that and this relates to that. And I mean, the whole entire server is really just a matter of like pulling down images and zip files that relate to certain things. So writing a workflow about I could definitely see like, oh, I want you, the workflow is I want you to test out this endpoint that we've built, and then this one, and then run the data on that, and then write a test. If it all looks good, write a test. So like reinforces that. So I can be just a lot more descriptive. I feel like instead of like talking about what not to do, maybe instead talking about what to do is a little bit like, maybe that's like the conversation that we're kind of dancing around here.
So if you notice here, like, remember it wrote this workflow, this implementation. But when I look in here, I don't see any review. We see regression testing. We see, I don't know exactly how it thought it did this step right now, but it definitely didn't deploy it anywhere. This post implementation review, that looks like a review in name, but let's look at what it's doing here. Monitor usage, like this is nonsense. It's not been deployed right now, so like nothing's really happening here. So we'll end up stripping this out, right? But verify all success criteria is met. Okay, so like let's see if it has done this one. So I think one thing that can happen is when it starts to get on steps that are like this that are like nonsense, it may actually like mess it up. So like let's ask it here because it's just talking in phases, not steps. Like let's say like which steps of this is going to be an interesting answer because it says it's completely done. So let's see what it says.
Okay.
So this kind of proves my point. When it got to step 8, it started to recognize that we were kind of getting into like asked to do things that are like well beyond what it currently has. Let's see what it says. Like, okay, let's ask. No, now it's going to magically go. I wasn't asking it to go, but and I'm going to like try to really constrain it and put it in this so it can only answer a question, not do anything.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Is like sometimes you kind of get into this mode where you're in orchestrator mode, and then all of a sudden you kind of have like the workflows pause. You have a general question to ask, and if you catch yourself asking it to orchestrator mode, it's like, oh yeah, so you want me to do more work?
Yeah, right. Like with orchestrator mode, when you ask that, you're relying on it to like reason about it and answer it. The agent is not enforcing any kind of control. So like what I'm doing is like I'm forcing some more rigid control because when I switch to ask mode, it has only a limited set of abilities of what it can do. So that narrows it to the model. So it can give us a more stay more on the task that I'm asking right now. Where it's like, it's not wrong. A lot of people asking why would you stop at step 7 would be implying continue to the end, but I really was not. That's not what I was implying. So let's see what it said here. Contributing factors. Okay. All right. Okay. This kind of question that we're asking it here is critical to making good workflows because when you make one, it doesn't do what you want. You can try to, explicitly say it didn't do what I wanted, so I'm going to tell it to do that thing. But if you don't understand why it didn't do it, sometimes that like the mitigation you put in place is not going to be effective. So trying to understand like, oh, did I have a previous step that made it think this? So it's not that I just need to add something; I need to modify something. So it can be like incredibly insightful to try to like really hold it down to like explain why. Okay, premature completion because it thought it was functioning. Yes, so this is exactly what I was saying.
I subconsciously assumed that steps 8 through 12
So I started to think, okay, this is not for me because
Mhm.
again, when we were going through and saying it's a complete BS. But interesting, like 11
It
seems
almost
very
felt
much
what
like
you and
complete.
I felt, right? Has infrastructure that I don't have access to,
Uh-huh.
right? You and I subconsciously felt that also and inferred it, but went ahead and made like hard decisions that we should just remove this. Whereas like agents are kind of more trending in the, hey, this exists for a reason. Like I feel like they have, like the agent has to assume always that the input it's getting, oh man, that the input that it's getting is of high quality, not generated and unreviewed maybe, but
Mhm.
because I don't have access to that infrastructure either because it doesn't exist.
Yes. So look, we're not going to make it recognize that. We're going to ultimately
Mhm.
change this, right? Like we didn't spend a ton of time reviewing it. We want to see what it does. But ultimately, we either heavily revise or remove these steps, these 8, 9, 10.
Mhm.
But now let's see if it picks back up here. Does a little bit of review. Let's see what it finds. But these workflows do not make it any more one shot. I think like you can one shot it from a workflow standpoint, but like they don't make it itself any more of a one shot. Um, um, but when you start to add in reviews and things like that, that starts to get into like these patterns. So let's try to find this blog. There's a really good Anthropic blog. It's like what is it? I can't think of the word. This will find it. Building effective agents. Yeah. So like it's a really good blog from like a few months ago from Anthropic. And it's going to start to talk about okay, yeah, like some definition of uh, agents. But then it starts to talk about some of these like workflow patterns. And I think some of these actually
Yeah, that's kind of
apply.
yeah.
Um, and so like um, I think it probably feels like a little overkill to like have it do 3 plans and then compare the plans, but like that wouldn't be crazy, right? Like in our planning phase up here,
Mhm.
you could say um, create. Uh, you made the point earlier of like if we had modes that were 4 different models. Let's say we had a Gemini model, a GPT-4 one model, and a Claude model, like Claude
Mhm.
Sonnet, and we said that what we want Orchestrator to do is we want it to hand it to each of these 3 modes. It won't be able to do it in parallel because the Roo Code doesn't have that ability yet,
Mhm.
but it can in series say, okay, go to Claude Sonnet, have it do an architecture plan, output it to Markdown. Go to GPT-4.1, create a plan, output it to Markdown. Go to Gemini, create a plan. And then you can pick which one you want to be the reviewer or the judge at the end and say, look at all 3 plans, compare them, figure out what the best way to do it. It could be a combination or it could be picking one,
Mhm.
and then proceed, right? So, like, the idea is like these are patterns from successfully building agents or building like LM workloads, and they totally apply to like these workflows that we build. Um, let's see some other ones here. Um, here's the idea of like reviewing.
Yep.
It's not about like how do I make my prompt. Well, at least I don't believe it's about how do I make my prompt perfect. Sure, try to improve your prompt, but trying to work the game of I got to have one prompt that just one shots the whole thing is like I feel like a losing battle from the beginning. Like
Yep.
you'll
I mean,
always
that's that.
achieve a level of scale that it breaks down.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's that pattern where you do some work and then you go outside for a walk and then you come back and you review your work and you discover something new, you know?
Yeah. So like how do you build
Except
in
it does it itself. That's just a new task every time.
well, and it is shocking to me that the same model, same settings produces a result, and then when you ask it to review that result, it'll second guess the hell out of itself in good ways. Um, but you've got it in a different prompt. It's in a slightly different mindset, and it's incredibly effective. So, like creating a cycle in your workflows, like this implementation workflow, in the end, it's going to have a cycle of like going back and forth between feedback and addressing it until all the medium or high feedback is addressed, and then it'll be allowed to proceed. And like orchestrator can facilitate that back and forth between like code mode and the reviewer mode, and just keep going back and forth. And what comes out the other side is going to be like worlds better than what would have come off between the best prompt for one iteration of code mode. So this is like a really good blog to just really raise the bar on like how you're thinking about workflows and ways to make them really effective for what you're trying to do. We're coming up on time. We're on step 12, so this thing's about to end. We may pick it up next time and see where it netted out. Given that this workflow that we're running is the first iteration of it ever, I'm almost certain it will not be fully successful. There will probably be like failing tests or linting errors or something unsavory about the code changes. So I think we'll next time go through some of these further iterations of the workflow. Ultimately, what we want to get to, right? Like what we're trying to achieve is like when we have a backlog like we created here, we want to be able to have a workflow where we say, okay, we brainstormed some features that I need to have, right? Like I need to have the stuff for doing this invoice reporting, and here's what we have so far. Here's what I need, and maybe we interact with it back and forth. We've created our backlog, and now we want to have built up the tooling within this project to say, okay, go off and implement those things. Maybe make a commit per tool or something or per task. Work in the ticketing system. Like maybe I don't even have tickets yet. So like maybe I want to say, okay, this was like a PRD. I mean, this is kind of like a really low entry level PRD. Maybe like, okay, now create a ticket for each one of these tools in the backlog. Like we kind of have done that with these checkboxes, but maybe in like a more real world scenario, you'd say, go, okay, great PRD brainstorm. Like I approve all these. Go create tickets for each one of these things. And then you kind of want to say, now go implement all those tickets, like either one PR or all the PRs. Like it depends. But ultimately, we want to see, can we get to a place where it's like, okay, we're thought through the product.
Yep.
We thought through how we want it engineered. We've created our workflows. We've created our rules that govern how it's going to implement things and how it's going to engineer them. And now like, go off and do it. That's what we're trying to achieve. And I think we're starting to scratch the surface on that. Like we've picked one tool to implement, and we have like our draft workflow, which just finished, by the way. But after we hone the workflow a few times, we're going to start trying to say, okay, go off and run.
Right.
So like a few things that were, I think, critically important. It didn't ask us any questions really along the way. That's critical to being unintended. Like it made assumptions if it needed to, right or wrong, but it didn't stop. It didn't do too many things. Like we had that terminal thing at one point, but it pretty much ran unintended, which is huge. Now the question then, is it correct? But I think that's a matter of adding in the review steps, the testing steps, things like that to add rigor to this workflow. But I think we're nearly there. So maybe one or two streams from now, I think we're going to be at that point where, okay, so for a Clockify MCP server, I could outline the backlog and go do it. Something that'll be interesting for the step beyond that is then for us to try to say, okay, this project was for a Clockify MCP server. We know we're going to need like a QuickBooks one probably too. I don't think QuickBooks has one yet. What if we try to take the rules, take the workflows? Can we take the bits that are generic from them, drop them in a new project,
right,
and then right from the rip say, here's the backlog that here's my backlog for QuickBooks MCP. Go off and just make the whole thing.
It's like we've got the methodology defined to like build an MCP for these financial tools.
Right.
Maybe there's like a little bit of industry specifics, but I mean, maybe it can be even more generic.
Well, I think that's how you build up the tooling over and over. I do think in the future there will be teams of engineers who maintain
Workflows.
implementation workflow.
Yep.
They basically maintain the factory.
Definitely.
And then there will be engineers who work on the requirements because it's not going to be pure product people. I think there is still engineering choices in the requirements,
Mhm.
but you're working more on the requirements. Maybe those engineers are also getting involved on the like the jobs that fail or the ones succeed. Like you're still doing reviews and all that kind of stuff. Like, um, and maybe you're doing all of it, all the above. You maintain the factory and you're doing the requirements. But I think that I don't know. To me, that's like incredibly exciting because it's like leveraging the full breadth of my knowledge of how I want to architect systems. But what it's not leveraging so much is like, what's the syntax for this function over here?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
that was always something I just either knew innately because I've used it frequently, or I was just looking up. Like
Mhm.
it really wasn't a part of my intelligence, right? That was more just like my memorization, like right. So, um, to me, if we achieve this future, I'm super excited by it because it just means like how many more products can I build? Like how much faster can I get things in users' hands and iterate? Um, I find that like incredibly exciting.
Yeah, by just like utilizing really effective workflows. And I think that's an interesting analogy of like maintaining the factory.
Mhm.
That's I mean, that's got my head going some places. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this of like, what is coding going to look like in the year 2030? I mean, we're here 5 years away from that, and already it looks astronomically different just 6 months in. So I'm just learning about these workflows right now. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely foresee like, I mean, if you can develop a very, very, very effective workflow for migrating legacy .NET REST APIs to a JavaScript stack, I mean, that, I mean, I can at least say as a Ruby on Rails developer, Elliot, you would have to let me know because you have .NET experience. But as a Ruby on Rails dev, if you told me to do that, I would be able to write very specific instructions for you about how to do it. That if you followed to the letter, you would probably be able to very successfully migrate that API over because Ruby on Rails is super opinionated. All the systems are usually structured the same, and you don't have to infer too much if you know how the system works. So,
Yep.
the use case isn't as wide for that, but I mean, there's just a lot of legacy code sitting around out there. I think about this a lot. Like, I mean, how much legacy code out there exists that's been built since the early 90s? And legitimately, how many engineers are there out there right now that can maintain and or migrate these legacy systems? I don't think there's enough of us,
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think we're sitting on top of a mountain of garbage code as an
So
industry.
that's like a huge like opportunity for it, right? Like that project may be like 25% of it may be actually creating the
Mhm.
process that's going to translate it. And
Mhm.
uh, you're building workflows, you're building rules, you're building prompts, like you're building out the agent that's basically going to migrate that code.
Yeah. And I mean,
You may
there's no
come in with some
invention
stuff.
and there's no invention in migration. A lot of people complain. I hear that they're like, oh, whenever you give an LLM a very open-ended creative task, it doesn't do a great job of it. Well, I can tell you as a software engineer, I've spent many, 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 many hours doing non-creative, extremely linear tasks where I'm literally looking at implementation A and I need to migrate it to implementation B with zero modifications. There's not a lot of creativity going on in there. The only thing creative is the ideas I have to come up to keep myself focused on the task because it is so monotonous and boring. So, I mean, if I didn't have to do it and I could instead be maintaining a factory of systems that are doing this for me, I mean, that's just like a more compelling thing. I would prefer to be doing that personally.
Yeah, I think it leverages all the same skills and thinking and logic, in my opinion. It's like you're programming the LLMs. You're not programming the classic ASP to React migration. You're programming the LM to do that, and so it's just take it one step removed. It's just one
Mhm.
derivative,
Mhm.
um, but it requires you to know how to have done that migration to program it to do the migration. So, okay, should we conclude there? While you're talking, I pulled up a few examples on screen. I mentioned it at points.
Yeah, what are we looking at here? You might have to bump the font some for me, but
Klein, which is an agent similar to Roo Code, has released some features around workflows to make them a little bit more first class in terms of how you call them. Like you saw me referencing like the workflow document in context in Roo, which works fine, but there's a little bit maybe some syntax sugar, I guess you could call it, features that have been released with Klein for workflows to make this kind of thing easier. They've got a cool example here of like a GitHub review one. If you want to check that out. Windsurf I think Wave 8 is their latest wave, but it might be a different one. But release some custom workflows, very similar feature to what Klein's done too, around these ideas of like just trying to evangelize this idea that look, you can create a file of steps that represent some of your common tasks and have an agent perform them, whether that's like reviewing a PR or like creating a commit or creating release notes or whatever it may be. But of course, you can take that one step higher, and get to a point where, okay, I've now documented what my personal process is for implementing features or creating a product altogether. So, give obviously, if you haven't looked at Roo Code, that's my strongest recommendation. But Klein is a great tool also, and Windsurf is a popular one, alternative to Cursor. So check those out. Okay.
I was trying to pull that documentation here. I don't know if I had that link. I was going to share it with the chat.
Let me see if I can. Can I put it in chat?
Can you Slack it to me?
No, I cannot. I can Slack it to you though. And I'll give you some others that we pulled up. There's effective agents.
Nice. Nice.
The OWASP top 10 for Gen AI. And then way early in the stream, we talked about XML tags with from the Anthropic prompt engineering docs.
I'd just like to share some goodies with people, anyone watching along.
Yep.
It's good stuff, man. All right. I'm going to have to get on these workflows now.
Start small because once they get bigger, they get harder to maintain and modify. So start small.
Yep. Start small. Well, hey, I think that wraps it up. Appreciate anyone that joined us that watched along. And if you have any questions, put in the comments. Add us at this.labs on Twitter. Get at us in any way. Contact at this.labs. We've been doing a lot of this work, and we'll be back Thursday, right?
Thursday.
Elliot?
Yeah, Thursday.
For a little bit more of this, a little bit more vibe coding, a little bit more building of some MCPs. So, look forward to seeing all y'all drop in then. I'm shutting it down. There's a thumbs up.